So Naresh, like you said, Pakistan is not unique in terms of having a caretaker setup, but besides Bangladesh, which sort of, toyed with this idea of having this neutral, technocratic caretaker setup, other countries, be it Australia or Malaysia, that do also use the caretaker mode, have used it in the past. They would normally curtail the power of an existing government, right, to basically oversee elections and then new government come into power. In the case of Pakistan, we have seen several times, over half a dozen now, these caretaker setups, which are supposed to be neutral, and they come in with the idea of being able to create a level playing field for all political parties, and then let the will of the people express itself. Now, with the current setup, it has technocratic elements in it, no doubt. Some very competent people, but at the end of the day, the manner in which this has come about, indicates that this caretaker setup might A, stay on for much longer, and B, it might be taking decisions that are sort of beyond the ambit of a caretaker, this kind of transitory setup. And the decisions that it takes will have long-term implications on the political economy of the country.
Well, thank you for saying that, because especially I want to highlight the fact that now that the IMF program is in full throttle and it has brought the brunt on the common man who are facing inflationary pressures throughout Pakistan. There've been an energy crisis and people are somewhat revolting, but they have very limited options. It really brings, harnesses the question as to, is the caretaker government legitimate enough to enact these reforms to bring about such an evil for the people of Pakistan? Or secondly, have they been brought up at such a time with the go-ahead from a lot of behind-the-door powers who feel that had these reforms been implemented by elected governments, they would have faced greater backlash now that, this caretaker setup does not really cannot be called out for because it's there for the interim period. But here you mentioned a very crucial point that the big question that is being asked is how long will it last? And a number of laws were passed before the interim government came in, the caretaker government took the reins of the country, which actually enhanced their executive authority and allowed them the mandate to bring about a lot of other changes that usually are not that form within the ambit of the caretaker government. Secondly, I want to really bring under the spotlight the appointment of Senator Anwarul Haqqar, who's the caretaker prime minister, who before this appointment was relatively not very well known in the political affairs of Pakistan or at the higher levels of the podium of national policies. And he's been brought about by the army, to say so, which again raises another crucial point that Pakistan, for lack of a better word, has been a hybrid regime where the military establishment has had a very overbearing influence and a very overbearing power. In that sense, how long is this government going to last? Is this setup conducive for Pakistan's trajectory towards a full, complete autonomous democracy, or will that further strengthen the stronghold of the establishment?
Well, I think two complex questions here. So let's break them down, and let me take the former question first. So when it comes to caretaker setups, swallowing the bitter pill that that an elected government might not want to, brings to the fore then another dilemma, which is the will of the people. Because if we're living in governance system that is having elections and people are voting for a government and giving them that mandate, a caretaker setup clearly does not have that mandate. So, that is a dilemma to be wrangled with. But I think we have to sort of, from this kind of more theoretical premise, we have to get down to the nitty-gritties, in the realities of Pakistan. And there, I mean, many people have alluded to the fact that, we do have post-colonial elitist economy, right, where top-down and patronage-based systems are the way that the government is run. So, it's not from the grassroots level up, and that has a historical context. And that's a government model, a top-heavy government model that has kind of been followed over the various decades of military and non-military rule. So within that context, still, there is this desire for, coming back, right? So, I mean, any government, when it's coming, especially, to the crunch time of the next elections, the prior budget is going to be populist, right? Whether the donors like it or not. So there is, I mean, there is that, but and then of course we can get into, when you have subsidization. I mean, to give you an example of the wheat subsidy, for instance. So, it's used by the government and the international community, the IMF, World Bank don't want the government to spend money on that kind of subsidization, but it uses the rhetoric of food security and, but when you look at how that subsidy is framed and who benefits from it, it is not the poor, landless, malnutrition, chronically hungry people of the country. So there's elite capture, relative elite capture, even there. So, these are two elements, but then there's also the fact that we are in such a tight spot right now, right? And I mean, if you look ideologically, I mean, you tell me ideologically, the variation that we have. I mean, and I think that's not only uniquely a Pakistani problem. I mean, if you look at England, if you look at the US, I mean, you've had the Democrats in the US from Clinton onwards, they've moved center, right? Thinking that they'll sway some of the vote bank from the Republicans, but then what the Republicans did was they kind of moved more right, right? And similarly with Tony Blair onwards, the Labour Party became sort of, very corporatized. And in Pakistan, if you remember, the manifestos, I think the manifesto that the PPP had put out in, a decade or so earlier for contesting elections, that's, I think, when they'd won. But their manifesto at the time was very centrist, right? So, I mean, that kind of, those socialist aspirations, whether they were fulfilled or not, again, another debate, but it was a very centrist agenda. And, we saw Imran Khan, of course. I mean, I remember going to the Minare-Pakistan, the first big one where, one could see that there's visible support behind him, whether that support was orchestrated and some of it was actually, genuine as well. And he was, talking about, these loans and devaluation, in his public in his public speech. And he said that every time we devalue, we end up owing more money to the IMF. And I'm going to, and we've had others talk about breaking the kashkol, the bowl, the begging bowl. But again and again, we've had elected governments go back, and not that they've implemented those reforms perfectly, but they do, take austerity measures, to try and curb the fiscal deficit.